Today, Bitcoin rockets higher after Grayscale scores a huge victory in its court battle against the SEC. And Dave Weisberger of CoinRoutes walks us through whether that court decision means we're just weeks away from the first spot Bitcoin ETF in the US. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Crypto markets in rally mode this morning after a new ruling from the DC Court of Appeals strikes a major blow to the SEC's denial of spot Bitcoin ETFs. We'll tell you more about that ruling in just a second, but first, by noon Eastern, Bitcoin topped $27,000. Ether climbed to more than $1,700, and XRP, which recently scored its own victory against the SEC, rose to 53 cents. Okay, let's first talk about a couple other stories you should know about. First up, DCG just reached an agreement in principle with creditors of its subsidiary Genesis. According to a court ruling filed on Tuesday morning, the deal includes a new loan repayment plan for $630 million in unsecured loans that were due back in May, along with $1.1 billion that were due by 2032. All told, the filing says the deal could help unsecured creditors recoup around 70 to 90% of their assets. Genesis halted withdrawals back in November after the collapse of FTX, but avoided bankruptcy until mid-January. Next, the SEC took its first enforcement action involving NFTs. The agency reached a $6.1 million settlement with Impact Theory LLC, a Los Angeles-based media company that raised nearly $30 million in Ether from NFT investors. The company suggested those investors would reap massive returns based on its future success and claimed to, quote, do whatever it takes to make sure that that is true. It also claimed to be trying to build the next Disney. In a statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, Impact Theory's co-founder Tom Bellew said the company is pleased to announce its settlement with the SEC, but disappointed that, quote, the SEC has chosen to broadly question the exciting technical innovations that make digital assets possible through the lens of the securities law. This news also comes a week after a former OpenSea manager was sentenced to 3 months on an NFT-related insider trading case. All right, let's talk about that ruling in the case between Grayscale and the SEC. The DC Court of Appeals just sided with Grayscale, which sued the regulator over its denial of a plan to convert the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an ETF. The court said the regulator, quote, failed to adequately explain why it approved the listing of 2 Bitcoin futures ETPs, but not Grayscale's proposed Bitcoin ETP. The court also said that unlike treatment of these products was unlawful. Grayscale called the ruling a monumental step forward, while the SEC said it was reviewing the decision to determine next steps. Now, this ruling could have huge implications for both Grayscale and the long list of spot Bitcoin ETF proposals in front of the SEC. To learn more about what all this means, I spoke to Dave Weisberger, the CEO of CoinRoutes. Big ruling today. What is the significance for Grayscale?
Well, the significance for Grayscale is that they will almost certainly have the ability to convert their Bitcoin trust to an ETF, and potentially some of the other trusts that they're doing could go in that direction. There's a lot of assets in the Grayscale ETF, and so if they are approved at around the same time as BlackRock and Fidelity, that gives them a chance to keep their business going forward. Whereas if this decision had gone the other way, or if it had taken longer, or if the SEC had approved other applications first, then they would have been lagging, and they might have seen their assets flow out once it all came down. But interestingly, ETFs are nowhere near as profitable as closed-end trusts. So, in a kind of strange way, the longer it takes for the conversion, probably the better off they are.
Meanwhile, the SEC just put out a statement saying that they're weighing their next steps legally. Could this potentially get kicked up to the Supreme Court? What do next steps look like here?
The reality is the SEC looking at their options is just a political saving face strategy. Effectively, I don't believe they're going to be Don Quixote, the old famous aphorism of, tilting at windmills for people who do things that have zero chance of success. There's no chance that this Supreme Court would overturn this decision for a lot of reasons. And if you look at the decision, it was a resounding thumping. The court literally rejected every one of the SEC's arguments. So they have zero probability of that. So their options really boil down to two things. Option one is they could, if they were so inclined, withdraw the futures ETFs and basically say, oh, no, we didn't really want to do this, and have no Bitcoin ETF out there, which I believe would be close to political suicide at this point. That'd be the kind of thing that would just be really a bad look. Or two, what they can do is delay a little bit on Grayscale and approve BlackRock and Fidelity and some of the other ETFs which have information sharing agreements, and in fact just challenge Grayscale to do the same thing. I think that is much more likely. So what will ultimately happen here is it's a virtual certainty now that within the next several months, we will have approved spot Bitcoin ETFs, which give the SEC a political win, because, Gensler could make the statement, and he'd be accurate, that by doing what he's done, he's gotten some oversight of the Bitcoin spot markets, even though Bitcoin is not a security. And he does that with these information sharing agreements. So he could take that win. I think he will do that. I think he will do exactly that.
You mentioned a timeline of a couple months. When will we have a better sense of when, Grayscale's conversion to an ETF could actually happen?
Well, I think that there's a couple of cross currents here. First is they don't have to respond immediately. They can weigh their options. They can look at what they're doing. There are deadlines that are coming up that are shorter term in September with other ETFs that have been approved, that have been denied, or that have been filed for. So my guess is after everyone gets back from the holidays, I think the SEC will assess. I would be actually unsurprised if Bitcoin ETF approvals don't start next month. Grayscale may not be in the first one. Maybe it will be in the first one. As I said before, it's possible that Grayscale isn't really going to push on time. They simply want certainty of what's going to happen.
Which applications are coming due in September? Are we looking at BlackRock, Fidelity, or another tranche of?
Yeah, I think it's not that they're coming due. I think there is an initial point, because there's a 45-day thing where the SEC could respond. The SEC could certainly delay those again. They've been doing that for years, but they have the opportunity to respond. And I think there are people who think that mid-September, the BlackRock and I believe Fidelity as well, and I think ARK Invest are coming up where the SEC could say something on any of these things. Plus, the SEC could just basically say, yeah, you know what, let's do this, and do it with a press release and try to make it a political win as opposed to a political loss. And that could happen at almost any time. Frankly, they could do so tomorrow, although I would be stunned if they did so.
Crypto markets celebrating this news. We're seeing this surge up in a lot of major cap coins, Bitcoin leading those gains. What do you expect to see in terms of how this ruling will ripple into the crypto markets in the weeks ahead? Is this a short-lived exuberance? Because we saw a similar run-up when BlackRock put in its application in June. A lot of crypto tokens came off those highs. So where are we headed next?
Well, honestly, I think that we're looking at a slow, sustained rally that could get very interesting. The market has been leaning short ever since the BlackRock exuberance kind of faded, and people were waiting for a catalyst. The market has been incredibly boring. We saw what happened, a week and a half ago, where it looked like a momentum ignition, triggering of liquidation strategy happened that knocked Bitcoin from 29,000 down to 26. And it then, since then, is traded at 26 the same way it was trading at 29, i.e. large, patient buyers sitting in the market with lots of speculators moving in and out. The speculators had gone, pretty obviously towards more of short positioning. Well, those large patient buyers were waiting for this sort of thing, but will they start chasing? They'll only start chasing when they feel they have to. And that doesn't happen very quickly. So what you will probably see is a punctuated wall of worry rally, punctuated by varying times where people decide they want to try to run ahead. Bitcoin always goes up, it fades, and then it continues. So I suspect to see this is the beginning of a bull market phase for Bitcoin that will be more sustainable. But obviously, if the SEC decides to punt and delay again till January, things will slow down. But definitely the trend is in the right direction at this point.
So much of crypto policy in the U.S. has been set through these court decisions, this idea of regulation by enforcement by the SEC. We have seen some movement on Capitol Hill, bills making it farther than they ever had before, getting voted out of committee to a vote on the main floor. Where does Congress fit into the whole ETF debate? Are they completely beside the point at this stage, and it's really just being decided by the courts?
I think that is a great question. And I suspect that the staffers and Representative Richie Torres are probably doing cartwheels today. Because, look, politicians, I tweeted that they're the ultimate paper hands, right? Politicians go with the flow. They go with poll data. If Bitcoin becomes more legitimized in portfolios of the average American via their financial advisors, their RIAs, their mutual funds, you can bet that the politicians who have been stonewalling the FIT Act, and by the way, it was passed out of committee to the floor with 6 different Democrats voting for it, including Representative Torres. And there, on the Senate side, you have both Kirsten Gillibrand on the Democrat side and Cynthia Lummis co-authoring the bill there. I think you will find gathering momentum to have some level of regulation that is intelligent for crypto. Because let's be fair, the crypto industry does not want the Wild West, but the crypto industry doesn't want the SEC to enforce 80-year-old rules that don't work for modern technology. So what we want, certainly at CoinRoutes, we care about this a great deal. We want intelligent, principles-based regulation to protect investors and to do things. And I think that position will absolutely start to gain majority share if a Bitcoin ETF is approved and Bitcoin becomes more and more mainstream.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we will be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.